History isn't just a collection of dates and battles, it's packed with stories that'll make your skin crawl. Some deaths weren't just tragic, they were downright cruel, twisted beyond belief, and they leave you wondering how humans could do this to each other. Whether it was done for power, revenge, or pure sadistic pleasure, these moments show the darkest corners of human nature. In this video, we're diving into 5 of the most brutal and unthinkable deaths ever recorded.
Disgraceful. I can't comprehend what she's done.
A murder so inexplicably heinous, it still affects all of the officers called to the scene to this day.
Imagine waking up in a quiet, peaceful Australian town, never suspecting the horror that would unfold behind one ordinary-looking front door. In the year 2000, what happened inside that house in Aberdeen, New South Wales, was so twisted, so unimaginable, it would shake the entire nation and haunt it for decades. John Price was a well-liked man with a steady job and a couple of kids who adored him, but he made one fatal mistake. He let Catherine Knight back into his life. To the outside world, she might have seemed like just another fiery personality. But to those who really knew her, Catherine was dangerous, violent, unpredictable. A woman with a past soaked in blood and warning signs no one truly took seriously. Catherine grew up in a house filled with trauma. She claimed she was abused by men in her family, and that dark start seemed to shape her into someone who only knew how to lash out with fury. Over the years, she'd built a terrifying reputation, strangling her first husband on their wedding night, cracking his skull with a frying pan, stabbing another partner, even killing one man's dog to send a message. She didn't just lose her temper, she unleashed it. And yet, despite all the red flags, she kept finding her way back into relationships, one of which led her straight to John Price. Their relationship was toxic. Violent arguments, restraining orders, and one too many second chances. At one point, Price had even warned his co-workers, "If I don't show up tomorrow, call the police." He knew, deep down he knew something was coming. On the morning of March 1st, 2000, the blood smeared across the front door said it all. Police forced their way inside, and what they found was straight out of a nightmare. Price's body was on the floor, skinned, decapitated, and mutilated. His head was found boiled in a pot on the stove. His flesh, his actual flesh, was baked in the oven, served with vegetables on plates that had the names of his children written on them. And Catherine? She was lying nearby, barely conscious after taking a handful of pills. Not enough to kill her, just enough to drift away from what she'd done. Former detectives and first responders still talk about that day with a haunted look in their eyes. One officer recalled seeing Price's skin hanging from a meat hook, completely intact like some grotesque suit. It was the most horrific crime scene many of them had ever seen. The judge who sentenced her didn't mince words. He said Price's final moments must have been filled with sheer terror, while for Knight, it was pure enjoyment. That chilling contrast stuck with everyone who heard it. Catherine Knight became the first woman in Australian history to be sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. She's never getting out. And honestly, she shouldn't, because this wasn't just a murder. It was a descent into pure, calculated evil, the kind of crime that reminds us just how thin the line can be between human and monster.
The group of 4 were 18-year-old Hiroshi Miyano, 16-year-old Shinji Minato, 17-year-old Joe Ogura, and 17-year-old Yasushi Watanabe.
Junko Furuta was a 17-year-old Japanese high school student who was abducted, raped, tortured, and murdered. Her abuse was mainly perpetrated by 4 male teenagers: Hiroshi Miyano, 18, Joe Ogura, 17, Shinji Minato, 16, and Yasushi Watanabe, 17, and took place over a 40-day period starting on 25th November 1988. In Japan, the case is known as the concrete-encased high school girl murder case, as her body was discovered inside of a concrete-filled drum. The prison sentences served by the perpetrators ranged from 7 to 20 years. The brutality of the case shocked Japan, and it is said to be the worst case of juvenile crime in the country's post-war history. On the evening of the November 25, 1988, Miyano and Minato rode around Misato on their motorcycles with the intention of robbing and raping local women, and spotted Furuta, who was on her way home from her part-time job. Acting on Miyano's orders, Minato kicked Furuta off her bicycle and fled the scene. Miyano, under the pretense of witnessing the attack by coincidence, approached Furuta and offered to walk her home. After further gaining her trust, Miyano walked Furuta to a nearby warehouse and threatened her, telling her that he was a Yakuza member and that he would spare her only if she followed his orders. That night, Miyano took Furuta by taxi to a hotel in Adachi, where he raped her. He later called Minato's house and bragged to Ogura about the rape, after which Ogura told him not to let Furuta leave. In the early morning hours of November 26th, Miyano took Furuta to a park near the hotel, where Ogura, Minato, and Watanabe were waiting. They told her they knew where she lived, and that the Yakuza would kill her family if she attempted to escape. Minato agreed to allow Furuta to be confined in a room on the second floor of his house in Adachi for the purpose of gang raping her. Furuta was held captive for a total of 40 days. Throughout the rest of December, the severity of Furuta's abuse continued to escalate, and by the end of the month she was severely malnourished after being fed only small amounts of food and eventually only milk. Due to her injuries, she had become unable to walk to the downstairs toilet and was confined to the room's floor in a state of extreme weakness. Her appearance had been altered by the beatings, with her face becoming swollen to the point of unrecognizability, and her wounds had started to emit a foul odor. Less than 24 hours after her death, Minato's brother called to tell him that Furuta appeared to be dead. Afraid that their crime would be discovered, the group wrapped Furuta's body in a blanket and placed it in a large travel bag, then put the bag in a metal drum and filled it with wet concrete. At around 8 p.m. on 5 January, the group drove to a vacant lot near a construction site on the island of Wakasu in Koto, Tokyo, and dumped the drum there. Furuta's funeral was held on the 2nd of April, 1989. During the ceremony, one of her friends delivered a eulogy written by her classmates, which stated, "Jun-chan, welcome back. I never dreamed we would meet again like this. You were subjected to such cruelty, weren't you? You went through so much, didn't you? I'm upset with myself that I went on living, unaware of what was happening." Furuta's intended future employer presented her parents with the uniform she would have worn in her position, and it was placed in her casket. At her graduation, the principal presented her parents with her diploma. The location on Wakasu where her body was discovered is now an industrial zone.
On January 19, 1996, fate decided to deal a tragic hand to this 19-year-old, leaving behind a tale shrouded in enigma and unspeakable horror.
In the bitter chill of January 1996, Nanjing, one of China's oldest and most storied cities, became the setting for a crime so grotesque, so calculated, that it continues to haunt the country nearly 3 decades later. Dao Aiying was just 19 years old. A bright, curious student from Hunan province, she had recently enrolled at Nanjing University. On January 10, 1996 in the evening, Dao and her dormitory roommate were punished for the illegal use of an electrical appliance. After a conflict with the dormitory management, she left the building and did not return. Dao was last seen alive wearing a red coat with a black lining. She was reported missing, but her family was not notified by the authorities until January 19th. For days, her family held out hope. Her classmates searched. Her father, desperate, remained glued to the phone. But 9 days after her disappearance, that hope was ripped away in the most horrific fashion imaginable. The discovery began not with detectives, but with a city sanitation worker. On a routine morning near the university, the worker stumbled upon a plastic bag filled with raw meat. Believing it to be discarded pork, he brought it home to cook. It wasn't until he was preparing it in his kitchen that something stopped him cold. 3 human fingers, pale and unmistakable, were nestled inside. The horror of that moment would open the floodgates. The worker alerted the police, who quickly confirmed the chilling truth. The flesh in the bag was human. What followed was a gruesome cascade of discoveries. Over the next several days, more plastic-wrapped packages began to appear across Nanjing. Some were tucked under benches near a stadium. Others left at the university's front gate. More were found along roadways, by a hospital, even at a public bathhouse. Altogether, body parts were recovered from at least 8 different locations. The remains, painstakingly and deliberately dismembered, belonged to Dao Aiying. Her head and clothing would not be found until January 30th, completing a picture of slaughter that defied logic and stunned seasoned investigators. The details chilled the nation to its core. Her body had been meticulously dissected. More than 2,000 human remains were recovered. Diao's head and internal organs were boiled for several days. Crucial organs, including the heart, liver, and spleen, were never found. The forensics team was only able to identify the remains as belonging to a female through the analysis of body hair and muscle tissue. Relatives were able to identify her through a mole on her right cheek. A senior officer involved in the case described the killing as really cruel. The officer added that pieces of flesh were dissected with high precision, only achieved by an individual with great understanding of anatomy. Police concluded that the murderer must have been a professional butcher or surgeon. This was no frenzied attack. It was precise, methodical, almost medical. Whoever did this had anatomical knowledge, access to tools, and time. Time to mutilate, package, and distribute her remains without being seen. When police broke the news to Diao's father, he collapsed. His daughter hadn't simply been murdered. She had been erased, carved apart, and scattered like refuse across the city that was supposed to protect her. Panic spread. Was this a sadistic act by someone she knew? A calculated strike by a medical expert? Rumors swirled. Could it have been a fellow student? A professor? A foreigner? Some whispered about black market organ trade or university cover-ups. But despite extensive interviews, DNA testing, and nationwide investigations, no suspect was ever arrested. No one confessed. No one was charged. To this day, Dao Aiying's killer walks free. The Nanjing University mutilation case remains one of the most disturbing and unsolved crimes in Chinese history. It's not just the cruelty that lingers, but the silence, the unanswered questions, the dead ends, the justice that never came. For many, it's not just a cold case. It's a wound, a terrifying reminder that even in a city filled with students and scholars, evil can strike in silence and vanish just as quickly.
You say, uh-oh, not me. Hi.
For 13 summers, Timothy Treadwell lived what many would call a dream, roaming the wild Alaskan wilderness, surrounded by towering grizzlies, sleeping under the stars, whispering to bears like they were old friends. He called them his family. He believed he could protect them, but the dream that consumed him would eventually devour him, literally. It was October 2003. The season was late, dangerously so. Most grizzlies had already vanished into their dens for hibernation, but not all. The ones that remained were lean, desperate, and hungry, driven by survival instincts stronger than any bond Treadwell thought he had forged. Alongside him was Amy Huguenard, a quiet, intelligent physician assistant who had followed Treadwell to Katmai National Park, though not without fear. Her diary hinted at unease. She didn't trust the bears, not like he did. She wanted to leave, but love can be a heavy chain, one that drags people far beyond their limits. They were supposed to return to California. Bags were packed, flights arranged, but a last-minute argument with an airline ticket agent unraveled their escape. Treadwell, impulsive and defiant, chose to go back into the park instead, back to the bears. He wanted to stay one more week. He wanted to find a specific female bear he hadn't seen. He wanted something. He set up camp near a salmon stream. It was a known feeding site, but that year the salmon were scarce. and the bears that remained weren't the ones he knew. These weren't the familiar faces from summers past. These were strangers, wild, unpredictable, starving. Treadwell recorded footage that day, hours before his death, of a bear diving into the river for scraps. You can hear it in his voice.
Cracker, and she's enjoying a fish right now. I love you, Cracker. I do love you. She's my friend.
The tension, the uncertainty. He says he doesn't feel right around that bear. And maybe, just maybe, he knew. Somewhere deep down, he sensed the curtain was closing. On October 5th, he made a final satellite phone call to a friend in Malibu. He said nothing about danger, just routine chatter. By the next day, he and Amy were dead. The pilot who flew in to pick them up on October 6th found the camp eerily quiet, tents flattened, supplies scattered, and a large male grizzly lingering close by. When park rangers arrived, what they discovered was horrifying. Treadwell's dismembered remains lay not far from the campsite. His severed head, a portion of his spine, and a right arm still wearing his wristwatch. Nearby, Amy's remains had been partially buried in a mound of sticks and dirt, a bear's instinctual food cache. The bear guarding the area was shot and killed. A second, younger bear charged at rangers and was put down as well. Inside the first bear's stomach, human fingers, limbs, pieces of both Treadwell and Huguenard. But what sent a deeper chill through investigators was what they found in the wreckage. A video camera, battered but intact. It hadn't recorded any images of the attack, only sound. 6 long, agonizing minutes of screams, snarls, and desperation. The tape begins with Treadwell shouting that he's being attacked. "Come out here, I'm being killed out here." Amy can be heard pleading for him to play dead. The bear retreats, then returns. There are more screams, then silence. Not even the camera lens had been removed. It had all happened that fast. Filmmaker Werner Herzog, who later created the haunting documentary Grizzly Man, speculated that the camera had been turned on as they were setting up another shot, likely their last. He refused to play the tape publicly, saying it was too disturbing, too intimate, too final. Treadwell had broken every rule of the park. He camped too close, interfered with natural behavior, treated the wild like a playground. Authorities had warned him repeatedly, but he didn't listen. He believed he was different, that the bears knew him, that he was one of them. Tom Smith, a seasoned wildlife ecologist, said it plainly. It's a tragic thing, but it's not unpredictable. In the end, Treadwell's passion became his undoing. He wanted to protect the bears, but in trying to make them human, he forgot that they are not. Nature is beautiful, but it is brutal, unforgiving, and not meant to be tamed. And as the Alaskan wind howled through the pines that October, Timothy Treadwell and Amy Huguenard became part of the wilderness he so dearly loved, consumed by the very creatures he died trying to understand.
This is probably the cruelest death in the history of mankind, the execution of the Hungarian rebel Yorgi Dosa in the 16th century. He was forced to sit naked on a glowing iron throne. A glowing iron crown was placed on his head, and he had to hold a glowing scepter to ridicule his ambition to become king. 9 of his previously starved fellow rebels were led in front of this throne. Before his eyes, his younger brother was cut into 3 pieces. The executioners then took a pair of tongs from the fire and stabbed them into Dosa's skin. After they'd torn his flesh, the remaining rebels were ordered to swallow the meat. Those who refused were simply dismembered, while those who obeyed were released.
Yorgi Dosa, remembered today for the gruesome martyrdom that ended his life, was once a man of obscure origins and quiet strength, long before he became the fiery symbol of a crushed revolution. Born around 1470, most likely in the village of Dalnoc, modern-day Dalnic, Romania, he came from Zekeli stock, a people known for their warrior traditions and fierce independence within the Kingdom of Hungary. To his contemporaries, he was Yorgi Shekeli, a name that rooted him in his heritage and underscored the rugged resolve that would later define him. Yet his true lineage remains cloaked in uncertainty. Historian Markey, writing in 1913, suggested that Dosa descended from the Dosa family of the Sovat branch of the Urlots clan. He based this theory on a 1507 court document that mentions a Georgius Dosa Siculus de Macfalva, now Gândari, Romania. If Markey was correct, then Yorgi was not only from noble stock, but the son of a Vajda, an infantry captain named Tamaz, who, along with his brother Adam, traced their roots back to a man named Andres Dosa of Marosek. These claims attempted to provide a noble scaffolding to the peasant commander's background, as if to suggest his later leadership had always been fated. But not everyone accepts this narrative. Historian Pataki has raised serious doubts. He points out that among the Sekelis, especially those of the Lofo class, or minor nobility, land ownership was central to both status and stability. These families were typically rooted in one place for generations, reluctant to part with their property, and thus unlikely to move between towns unless absolutely necessary. This casts shadows over the claim that Yorgi of Dalnok and the Georgius of Macfalva were the same person. After all, the Dosa surname was not rare in Transylvania at the time. It was entirely possible, even probable, that two different men bore that name. Still, whatever his precise lineage, it's clear that Dosa emerged from a world shaped by military service and harsh feudal realities. He first entered history not as a rebel, but as a soldier, a competent, respected knight who fought in the wars against the Ottomans. It was this martial reputation that led to his appointment by Cardinal Tamas Bakoch in 1514 to lead a crusade of peasants against the Turks. The irony would not be lost on history. The man chosen to lead a holy war on behalf of church and crown would, within months, turn his sword against the very nobles who anointed him. Yorgi Dosa's background may be debated by scholars, but one thing is certain. His legacy was forged not in parchment records or noble lineages, but in the searing fire of rebellion. His unclear origins only make his rise and fall more poignant. He was a man shaped by uncertain beginnings and ended by unbearable cruelty, yet remembered not for where he came from, but for the ferocity with which he stood, however briefly, against a world built to crush him.